fear and horror are an appropriate response.
Which I know very well, so I've lived in London most of my grown-up life.
I think he should apologise.
There is no other reason to be given why you have not gone to hell since you have sat here. O sinner, consider the fearful danger you are in. You hang by a slender thread with the flames of divine wrath flashing about it, ready every moment to singe it. Nothing that you can do to induce God to spare you one moment.
He steps up to the microphones.
I feel like everyone else in this country today, utterly devastated. In our hearts and in our memories, forever.
Here's a man who was threatening his health through this kind of false labeling. It was absolutely amazing. But the food, his novel, 1984, addressed the importance of language in society and the control and manipulation of language to control and direct society.
Sorry, I'm going to have to be careful about saying the wrong word just for lots of reasons, but there's one organisation that receives £100 million from the government to provide advice to lots of migrants who have come over on boats or by ferry or by lorry, and they distribute across the country to, I think at the moment we've got 147 different other migrant advisory organisations, charities in this migrant advisory network.
That kind of difference also shows up in other answers, such as Jewish influence in the media or global affairs.
I suspect a lot of it is Muslims incorrectly or erroneously conflating what's happening in Israel-Palestine with Jewish people who have nothing to do with Israel-Palestine.
And that scares them, and it reaffirms all the stuff they're reading in the papers that they wouldn't really believe, but they've seen it now, and that's true. So when people are talking about these things, they quite often link it back to things that they think are real, that they're seeing. So I think when we're campaigning, we need to think as well about what these things are. So again, a lot of these anxieties are concentrated around Muslims. So we've seen this kind of concentration of anxieties from immigration more broadly towards Muslims and Islam in Britain.
They call them as well, don't they now, undocumented? That's another word, you know, that is used, isn't it?
Yes, undocumented has come really from the United States.
Right.
I think the most important point in 1984 is that power grows not out of the barrel of a gun. Power grows not out of the thought police and rule by terror. It grows out of the power of language in that novel.
Which I call the immigration industry.
Yeah.
Probably not exact, but certainly in our country, my research is showing so far that the immigration industry is at least a £250 million a year, more than the people traffickers are making.
Really? What, can you just explain, you know, how is that made up?
What is reality? Reality is not external. Reality exists not in the mind of the individual, which soon perishes, but in the mind of the party, which is collective and immortal. What the party says is reality is real.
And each of them are receiving sums of money. So if you imagine 3 or 4 or 5 people are working there, all earning £30,000, £40,000 each from their allocation just from that one fund, then you've got somebody with a financial interest to have migrants coming into the country, because if there was none, they'd be out of a job.
We forget about that majority in the middle who, kind of to take you back to this one, they're the ones that can swing, and they're the ones that we need to persuade. So again, immigration is becoming more positive, but there are issues that are ingrained and are much, much, much more complicated.
The survey shows this particular prejudice occurs consistently amongst all other adult Muslims.
I'm now going to read out some statements about the way women are treated in Britain.
Generational change might be expected to feature more strongly when it comes to the place of women in society. Of course, equal rights and status for men and women are now enshrined in British law. Yet 39%, 2/5 of British Muslims surveyed, say women should always obey their husbands, compared with only 5% of non-Muslim Britons. And once again, except for the over 65s, there's no particular difference between age groups. I was more than mildly perplexed.
So a lot of the kind of academic literature talks about cultural anxieties, which is not always the greatest term. Quite often it's prejudice that they wouldn't really believe, but they've seen it now, and that's true. So,
and how else can the party do that? Except by language. Party has taken control of language and has taken it away from the individual. And that's the power, because those in power who control language control the way we see the world.
So a lot of the kind of academic literature talks about cultural anxieties, which is not always the greatest term. Quite often it's prejudice that they wouldn't really believe, but they've seen it now, and that's true. So,
see, any politician in power starts using doublespeak. The Democrats did. Right? I love Jimmy Carter's comment on the failed raid to free the hostages in Iran. He called it an incomplete success. He did that without even thinking about it.
I think a bit of an idea, but who are we talking about?
Right, so in terms of what I regard as the immigration industry, you start off with charities and non-governmental organisations.
So this view that multiculturalism has failed, that's something I've heard across the country. People are always saying to me, it's integration, it's the fact they don't integrate, and it's this move towards culture that is quite frightening, and that there's kind of very little work being done because a lot of us are quite afraid to talk about these things, to kind of pull that middle ground. But that also kind of contrasts with what people see in their day-to-day lives.
Why? And yet we repeat as parents, equality, equality, equality. And the Soviet propaganda system helps us to believe that equality is something which is desirable. Democracy, as it was established by fathers of this country, of this system in the last century, is not equality. It's the system where different people, unequal people, have a chance to survive and help each other in constant competition, in constant perfection, not in equality, which is superimposed from a godfather or a nice person.
The country is in turmoil. And indeed, on the 2nd of May 1997, Tony Blair enters Downing Street.
Blair came into office with an enormous majority, so I think it would have been quite natural that the palace might have been a little bit scared as to what he was going to do with it, as it were.
He did that without even thinking about it.
The main concern is to get the paycheck.
I want to know what you think. I want you to know what kind of people we are, what kind of government we'd be.
What kind of country?
Refreshment from start to finish.
The finding of truth and freedom.
If you want to change something, you have to be a part of something. You have to get involved, you have to educate yourself on it, and you have to make a change from inside. It's all good and well having opinions saying no one listens, but if you're not there to be listened to, who's going to listen?